I don't know if this is working. This is my first time. My first time trying to live stream, but it says I'm live. And there's 2 people here with 2 likes. You gotta say something to me. Say something so I know you're there. Well, my name is Martha Sharp, and this is my very first live stream. In case you hadn't noticed, I have no idea what I'm doing. Oh, okay. Hi, Zafira. Thanks for coming. And I guess I could retweet it on Twitter just to see if anyone's around who wants to come. I did figure out how to use OBS because, I have done some live coding challenges in the past, and they weren't actually live because I hadn't figured out how to do screen sharing when I'm live streaming. But you can do that with OBS, so I figured that out. And but I haven't gotten to it yet. I just make videos as simple as possible, basically. We met the other day on LinkedIn. Great. Well, yeah, LinkedIn has been great. Have you been on Twitter at all, or do you mostly hang around on LinkedIn? Let's see if I can retweet my... here it is. Retweet with comment. Of course, my husband did something even more embarrassing last week. He did live streaming for like 4 hours. It's kind of like this competition we have. Well, it's not a real competition, but he does something crazy and then I have to do something crazy, or I do something crazy and then he has to do something crazy. So it's kind of a back and forth. It's kind of fun. Okay, great. You're started on Twitter. I stayed away from Twitter for a long time. I just didn't get it, I'm like, what are people talking about? LinkedIn made a lot more sense to me because people were networking and it was very business-like and professional. And Twitter, people were just coming up with all sorts of crazy stuff and I didn't know what was happening. But I'm glad I did because that's how I got my job. And I don't know, you can kind of joke around more on Twitter, which is kind of fun if you're not just talking about business stuff all the time. It can feel more like you're talking to real people. So your coding journey, where are you at in your coding journey? Are you just beginning? Have you been learning for a while? How are you learning? I know I'm making you do a lot of typing just because you're the only person here right now. But it's kind of funny that I can talk and you have to type. Very interesting. Now, I guess if you guys have questions, okay, if you have questions or want to say something, go ahead. Meanwhile, I guess I will just kind of talk a little bit about life and myself and development and pretty much whatever comes to mind. That's what I do in my videos mostly, is just I have something that I'm thinking about. I'm like, oh, I should make a video about that. And I do. So this is very different because I don't really have anything in mind specifically I plan on talking about. I did recently ask my followers on Twitter if they had any suggestions for videos to make. And I got some really good ones. I think that people really enjoy kind of the silly videos I make, like the karate one and the dancing one and such. I wasn't planning on getting up and dancing. But for the most part, people are interested in web development, and that's mostly what I've been talking about. So yesterday I struggled with TypeScript a lot. I'm learning it for my new job, and learning the basics was not so bad. But hello, Hernan. I'm sorry you can't correct me. But yeah, TypeScript yesterday was a huge headache. I learned the basics and it seemed pretty straightforward, but then I tried using it with Material UI and with React Router and with all these different libraries. And some of the docs were outdated. And so I was searching, there was GitHub, Stack Overflow, all sorts of forums. And I finally got the errors to go away one by one. And then I think by doing all that struggling yesterday and then sleeping on it, and then today, my whatever brain muscles I was working yesterday, they had a chance to rest and heal. And today, TypeScript was making a lot more sense. So that's really nice to end the week on a high note like that. So I'm ready to move on to the next thing next week. But it's a very new thing to be getting paid to learn. Because I'm used to just doing this on my own at home for free with nobody really caring. So it's a very different experience actually having a job now and learning these things basically as an investment to the company. Whatever I learn is going to help me contribute in a meaningful way to the products that they're creating. So it's a very different experience. And feels much higher stakes as well. Like, am I learning fast enough? Like, is it going to be good enough? All that good old imposter syndrome stuff getting in there. But at the same time, I just realized that they're getting a great deal. On the one hand, I have this really self-doubt and this, oh my goodness, what am I doing? Feeling. But on the other hand, I feel this confidence like, yeah, I am an amazing worker. I'm motivated. I'm smart. And they're going to be blown away by me. So there's like two contradicting things in me battling. And if I had to choose one, I would choose the confidence one. Yeah, that helps me get places a lot more than the self-doubt one, definitely. Being in real scenarios, the learning process is faster. Yes, I agree, unless stress takes hold, because stress is so paralyzing, it's that deer in the headlights thing. Like when you get stressed out, you can't do anything. Your brain doesn't work, your body doesn't function. So sometimes real scenarios can hinder your performance in that way. So having that confidence and somehow continuing to just hold it lightly and see it like a fun game instead of a really high stakes, like the fate of the world is on my shoulders kind of situation. Yeah, being able to enter in with a playful mindset instead of a very serious mindset can help learning work. Hi, Joe Schmo. What languages are you currently using? And which is your favorite? Well, the language is JavaScript, right? And then the framework for that, or the library for that, is React. So I'm a React developer. And, I got a little taste of Vue. I did like an intro to Vue, and all the Vue developers that I've talked to, they usually come from something else like React or Angular, and they are totally sold on Vue. So Vue sounds like at least the developer's favorite. Any developer I've talked to who's worked with Vue is just loves it. And so I wouldn't mind getting into Vue sometime in the future. But the reason I'm doing React is because that's what all these courses are teaching. That's what all these boot camps are teaching. That's what's being pushed in businesses and such. And just what I got into, you know. Now it's going to be very hard to go to anything else because I am falling in love with React Native. React Native is great. And I'm very excited because that's the next thing I'm going to work on at my job as well. I get to build a React Native app. So I'm very excited about that. And I'd love to do more with that. So it's very nice that I got into React because that's what you use with React Native. Yeah, I could talk about different things in React. Like, it was very interesting to learn that React is a platform. It doesn't depend on the platform. So like if you're doing it for web apps, you have React DOM. And then if you're using it with React Native, you have React Native. But in both cases, you're using React. And like today, learning TypeScript, I'm learning a lot more about React itself. Like I finally learned what JSX is and how it works. Like I've been using it for months now, but have I ever looked into what it is and how it works? Not really. I've just been doing it. And that's the thing with like modern web development is that we are, what's the phrase? Standing on the shoulders of giants or something? Isn't that a phrase? I keep trying to use like common phrases like this, and I always get them wrong, but usually get the gist of it, right? So standing on the shoulders of giants, maybe is the phrase, where there's so many people who have written the code and the docs and all these things. And now us new developers get to basically just take all these tools and all this code that's already been written and learn how to use it and do stuff with it, right? So, I mean, it's like cheating. It's really like cheating, which is why I actually thought about this the other day, how, you know, most job descriptions talk about, are you a rock star developer or are you a code ninja or something like that? And I thought about it, and I think I'm more of a pirate coder. Modern developers are more like pirates, I think. We cheat and we steal and we find the easiest, laziest way of doing things for the most part. There are a few ninjas out there who are all about developing skills and practicing your coding katas and awesome skills and mastering your craft and all that stuff. And I basically come in, I'm like, I just want to learn. I just want to figure out how to do stuff and figure out how to build stuff. Let the super smart ninja guys write the code and I'll just use it to create things. And I think we just need a mix of people in that sense. People who are creative. You feel, that's how you feel. You feel like a pirate. Is that how you feel, Priya? Is you feel like a pirate coder? You just cheat and steal and take shortcuts. I mean, you know what? Just be proud of it. Just I actually thought of a distinction the other day between logical reasoning and creative problem solving. Now, it's possible to have both, but I think that I'm actually very weak in the logical reasoning. Like when I did math was always my weak part in school. I've never, and even when I talk to super smart coders and they're using all this logic, I have trouble tracking with them. Like, what are you talking about? And I just feel dumb. It just makes me feel so stupid. But my strength, I'm very strong in like the creative problem solving. So I think of something I want to achieve or something I want to do. And then I find some creative way to do it. You know, I find what resources are available to me, and then I manipulate them around to make it do what I want it to do. And and you can't, like I said, you can have both, but I think I'm stronger. Like algorithms, I'm just not good at them. I mean, I could get better with practice, just like I get better at math with practice, but it doesn't come to me very naturally. Let's put it that way. Let's see what we got here. Learning Bootstrap. Yep. I mean, there's so many different libraries you can learn. And it always, anytime you try learning something new, you feel stupid all over again. Basically, it's just, it's Bootstrap, or for me, recently Material UI, or React Native, or whatever new thing you pick up, you're always going to feel dumb right at the beginning. And then let's see. You try to refactor, break it down, study each part of the code, etc. It's true. You need to do that if you're going to adapt it to your purposes, right? If you're going to steal code, reuse code, right? You need to understand at least a little bit what it's doing so that you can adapt it to your purposes. Otherwise, it'll just break your entire program, possibly. So yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Break it down. So, for example, like my full stack project that I built a while ago, it's called My School, and I did build the API for it. Now, I did build it from scratch. I adapted it to my purposes and everything, but how did I learn how to make it? I followed a tutorial. It was a very good tutorial. I made sure I understood everything he was doing so that I could adapt it to my own purposes, et cetera, et cetera. And I did have to change a lot of things too, because I was making an API for this app that was completely different than the one that he was making on the tutorial, right? But recently, before someone in a job interview that I had before the one I got here asked me about the code for that project, and especially for the back end, and asked me if I did it all by myself or if I was following the tutorial. And, I didn't make excuses. I'm like, you know what? I followed a tutorial. Yeah. Even though I had to adapt it and understand what I was doing and everything, I still followed it. And he said, yeah, I wondered because it's extremely clean code. I'm like, yeah, it really is. And yeah, so, I mean, I didn't get that job, but I also didn't finish the application process because that was the job that asked me to build an app from scratch using a language I was totally unfamiliar with and spending at least like 20 hours doing it. And I'm like, I'm not going to put all that work into this job that I don't necessarily want. Let's see what else we got here. When do you think you are prepared to apply for a React developer job? You have a few months in React, and every job description seems like I need a lot of experience. Yeah, well, of course they want a lot of experience. Everyone wants a lot of experience, right? Everyone. So when are you ready to apply for a React developer job? It's so loaded because every company has different needs, right? So even like my husband is a React developer at a really big like corporate company, huge. And he, on the one hand, on the huge corporate level like that, there's a lot of competition. So there are a lot of applicants for the job. But on the other hand, they're much more laid back in terms of how advanced you are. So like when he first started his job, basically his manager did not expect him to contribute at all for like the first month, right? Versus the job that I just got with a startup in California, and there was basically no onboarding process. Just from day one, they wanted me to start contributing, Right. I mean, now they're telling me, okay, please make this React Native app from scratch all by yourself. um, so they wanted a self-starter. They wanted someone who is capable of doing that. And I guess I had demonstrated that I was capable of doing that because I had just posted a freelance React Native app that I had built for a client by myself, right? So I had definitely demonstrated that I could do exactly what they want. Um, so that was nice for them. Most companies, like the big corporate company I was talking about, you're not going to be doing that. There's going to be this ginormous code base that is so confusing, and you're going to be working on tiny, tiny little snippets of it, and trying not to break the whole thing. So all I'm saying is that how prepared are you? It really depends on the job and the company. So you just apply for all sorts of things and let them decide, basically. Um, Now, it was kind of clear to me when I first started applying to jobs. I started getting regular feedback about my skill level. And the feedback that I got was that I had not really done any professional level work yet in my projects. Um, like I had done a bunch of just little personal projects, but I had never collaborated with anyone for one thing. For another thing, I had never even worked with JSON web tokens or user login or any of this, or like form validations or any of this stuff that you work with on any app imaginable, basically. Um, so because I got that feedback, I decided to take a break from job hunting to up those skills, to fill in those gaps. And I'm glad I did, even though then the global pandemic hit and there were hiring freezes everywhere, right? So bad timing. But at the same time, here I am. So, but even the process of applying for jobs will show you what you need to know when you're applying for jobs. So you could even just start right now. You could start applying right now. And then, I mean, it's kind of a painful process. So make sure that it doesn't just shatter you completely, but you could start applying with the mentality that through the process of applying and interviewing, you will learn what you need to know and the gaps you need to fill in so that you will be prepared for your next job. Yeah. Does that make sense? Is that kind of, yeah. And job descriptions, like the rocks, I talked about developers being either ninjas or pirates, not rock stars. Think about rock stars. Like, you do not want a developer who's a rock star. That's like a bad fit. Rock stars will not care about attention to detail or sitting there at a computer. They just want to be on stage rocking out, right? So it's just very clear that whatever job description asks for a rock star, it was not written by an engineer or a developer. It was written by a HR person or something. But that was really interesting. I actually did a poll on Twitter about what do you think developers are most like? And the one that came up the most was detective. Awesome. Was a detective. Like, a lot of developers identified with the detective. And that really is a lot of what we do. Not in the building as much, but definitely in the debugging, and like, especially if you work on the huge corporate level, like I was talking about, where there's just little things that, I mean, you've got this huge code base and you've got to investigate, like, where's the problem, or where do I need to add this feature to make it work, and different things like that. So yeah, that makes sense to me. Wow. By the way, I've got a little drink here. I don't drink very much. We just don't. But I got this. When I finished my freelance project. It took me about 4 weeks or 5 weeks. And I completed it, and the client was happy. And I just felt like celebrating. So I went out and I bought a bottle of bourbon. um, and I've never really been a bourbon drinker, but it just sounded good for some reason. So that's what this is. It's just it's basically an old fashioned, but without the bitters. I see the sugar on the bottom that hasn't dissolved yet. Oh well, but that's kind of nice. Um, how do you deal at work or in your side projects with creativity and the momento designing the mobile apps or website? Oh, design. Talking about design, colors, design. Yes. Let me just say, I have a lot of respect for UX people, for designers, because there's so much that goes into it. Um, so many different choices. And that's kind of aggravated me from the very beginning. There's too many choices, right? Whereas, there's a lot of choices in like the architecture of an app as well that you have to deal with. So it's not like you don't have to make hard decisions when you're, I'm not going to say on the back end, further back, like the back of the front end. Um, so there's going to be decisions no matter where you are, but um, it's definitely an art finding out like the different contrast levels and what's too bright, what just color choices make you go cross-eyed and give you a headache. There's accessibility, of course, to consider, but also just user experience. Here's what's helped me a lot, because I'm not naturally inclined to design, to know what visually is appealing, et cetera, et cetera. Once again, I steal. I cheat and I steal. I look at different apps that I've had a good experience with. Um, I really like my Gmail app. There's Twitter, of course. There's my banking app that I have. Uh, all the different apps that I've had the best user experience with. And I look at them and I try to make connections. Like, what is similar about all these different apps that make it a really good user experience? And like in React Native, for example, it's going to be different on the web versus mobile, of course. But you use your thumb to hit things, right? So anything that's furthest away from your thumb is going to be the hardest to get to. So, for example, on the Twitter app, you've got the big tweet button right in the bottom right corner of your screen, right? And it was the same with Gmail, your big plus button right there. This is the easiest thing for you to hit, no matter what. And you don't want things too close together, too. Like, for example, the LinkedIn app that I have, you have these two buttons, profile and something else, just right next to each other. And my thumb is just way too fat to try to just click one of them without accidentally hitting the other one. And that's bad user experience. So that's kind of been my guideline in terms of choosing designs and making designs, is what apps or websites do I get the best experience with, and why do I get the best experience with them? And yeah, in terms of colors, I usually have to ask someone else, because I really like things bright and colorful, and that's not the best necessarily. So it's okay to ask someone else too. Like, if you have a friend who is very visually inclined and can tell you these things, then great, reach out to them and say, what do you think of this? Like, ooh, that gives me a headache. Yeah. So let's see. What have we got here? We've got 8 people. This is kind of fun, guys. I've been wanting to just be able to chat with people. Like last Friday, I was just like, I just want to hang out with someone and chat with them. Of course, I can't see you guys, but in a certain sense, like Zoom meetings are kind of a replacement, but they're kind of a pain too, because um, have you been to a Zoom meeting and you can't tell who's talking? Like I have to scan every square. Like, wait, who is talking right now? I mean, they need the square to light up or something when someone starts talking, so I know who's talking. Trilogy boot camp at the end of February and still seeking your first job. I know, I know, you guys. This is just tough. I basically gave up on job searching. Like, I was this close before the pandemic. Um, but when I say it was this close, I was really just this close to um, like an internship almost. Like, it wasn't even a full fledged position. Um, so, in a certain sense, it worked out for the best, even though it was very frustrating because why? Because I got the chance to continue to up my skill level. Like, that's basically what happened. When I just stopped applying for jobs, I started to focus on just upping my skills, continuing to up my skills. And eventually it got to the level where, wow, we need this person. Um, which was kind of my plan from the beginning when I started learning, but I got impatient. My plan was to learn and to continue learning and to learn in public so that eventually the jobs would just start coming to me, you know? But I just got impatient. I'm like, oh, I so want a job right now. So I just started applying, and nothing, except for a bunch of talking to recruiters, a bunch of screenings, a bunch of pain. Um, so and now because I waited, because I had to wait basically and up my skills more and more, my first position is is very nice. Let's put it that way. I'm like making some money. um, let's see here. Let's see. You said about how you got your first gig. Super inspired. Yes. um, trying to learn publicly too. Yep. Learning publicly is so good, especially on Twitter. I realized, like on LinkedIn, I was learning publicly basically from the beginning. And it was good because I got a lot of encouragement and feedback and such. But yeah, LinkedIn is more for recruiters and the more traditional way of getting a job. Whereas Twitter, I started hearing about people getting jobs on Twitter without even having to interview. And that's basically what happened to me. Like the interview was kind of just a getting to know you formality, but there was no coding challenges. There was no anything. They basically already knew that they wanted me. So it was like, I guess it really happens. Um, okay, Kayla, did you at any point feel like you were not learning fast enough during your 1 year journey? Yes. And that's why I basically rushed. Like I rushed a little too much, I would say. Um, and I have been reflecting on what I would do differently if I were to do it again, and I would not rush so much. Um, and I did a lot of free code camp, and they say each section is supposed to take like 300 hours. And, I kind of rolled my eyes at that. I'm like, it took me like 100 hours max per section. But if I had taken my time with it and gotten, uh, instead of just rushing through so I could get to the next thing and rushing through so I could get to the next thing and the next thing, um, maybe it would have taken 300 hours if I had become more of an expert in CSS and HTML, if I had played around with it some more and built some more things. But, I wanted to, I was in a hurry. I didn't want it to take forever. But it ended up taking a lot longer than I wanted to anyway. So I may as well have taken my time a little more. And then I would have possibly, this is all hypothetical, of course, but potentially I would have saved myself the aggravation of going through a lot of applications and interviews that didn't go anywhere, perhaps. Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, I felt like I wasn't going fast enough and I rushed. Um, but in a certain sense, you can't rush learning, which I realized yesterday, even just yesterday when I was learning TypeScript. And I compare it to like if you're working out, like you're trying to build your muscles, get big muscles, right? So you go to the gym one day and you're starting to lift weights and you're watching your muscles like, why aren't they getting any bigger? It's like that's not how it works. You got to do it regularly. You've got to give your muscles a chance to heal and grow. You got to drink your protein shakes and eventually you'll start to see them growing, but you can't just sit there and lift weights and expect to watch them grow right there. Let's see, where should I start with learning coding? I'm at ABC level. Great question. And honestly, I have started working on an ebook, which is basically a curriculum to answer that exact question, like basically what I did, but better. um, I always recommend start. I always recommend starting the way I started with the free courses on Code Academy. It's a great way to get a taste and an introduction for what it's all about. Start with the HTML, CSS, and the JavaScript. And then I moved on to Free Code Camp, and that they really complement each other. Free Code Camp covers a lot more, but the explanations aren't as good, I would say. And the exercises don't give you as much of a feeling for coding and the console and such. So start with Code Academy, possibly go on to Free Code Camp. The Odin project, I've heard a lot of good things about, but I never went through it myself. And then in terms of tutorials, the Net Ninja is very beginner friendly. So you can look up his intro to HTML, CSS, and his intro to JavaScript or JavaScript for beginners, whatever it is. And that's a good place to start. Very good. Let's see here. Opinion on coding bootcamps. What's my opinion on coding bootcamps? I so wanted to go to a bootcamp. I so wanted to go. But I asked myself, I was already like 6 months into learning, or 4 to 6 months into teaching myself already. I started out teaching myself because I wanted the freedom to quit anytime. I'm a stay-at-home mom with 4 little kids who need me, and I wanted to stay flexible, so if I tried it out and it ended up not being a good idea, I wanted the freedom to quit. And then when the time came when I realized I wasn't going to quit, this is for real, I want to take it all the way, I really wanted to go to a boot camp because there's just such a nice package. You've got the people that you're doing it with, your cohort or whatever it's called. You've got the TAs and teachers you can ask for help. You've got the nice curriculum and guide and checkpoints and projects. It's just this very nice package. So I so wanted to go, but I asked myself, if someone paid me $10,000 to teach myself, would I do it? And the answer was yes. Yeah, if someone paid me $10,000, I would just keep teaching myself. So that's essentially why I did not go to boot camp, is to save the $10,000. Plus, I was already pretty far along. The other thing about coding boot camps, like just based on Now, some people need a coding boot camp. Like my husband tried to teach himself and he was not motivated and he needed to get a job a lot faster than me. Let's put it that way. He needed to get a job ASAP. So a boot camp is great for that. It plunges you in fully immersed. There's a reason they call it a boot camp, right? And he learned so much and he networked and he did it. I think it was a few months after he graduated that he got his job. His first job was with someone who actually worked at like this little startup that was in the same building as his boot camp. And he had networked and introduced himself to him and everything. So that's what his first job was. And then that small amount of experience helped him get his next job, which was with this big corporate company. So yes, boot camps are very good for that. If you need to get in ASAP, and also you need all that other help, the structure, the commitment, everything, great. There are a lot of boot camps out there. The one he went to is called Digital Crafts. So I guess there are some that are better than others. Just do your research. But I guess the feedback I've gotten from a lot of engineers is that I'm way ahead of bootcamp grads. And that's really hard for me to believe because they pack a lot into those few months. But in a certain sense, that's the problem, is they're always moving on from one thing to the next before you get to take a chance to really delve into anything. So I hit a point in my learning journey that like after I finished the front-end library section in Free Code Camp, the next section would have been APIs and microservices. So moving to Node.js in the back end, right? And I did not feel comfortable enough with moving on to something new. So I decided not to do it, which you don't really have the freedom to do at a boot camp. And I decided to stick with React and Redux for a while. Which, in hindsight, I could have done with just vanilla JavaScript too. But I was really eager to get to React. Let's put it that way. So I'm not sure what this comment means. Skull, tooth, pump 6, yellow, and Cadillac. Is this some kind of retro pop song or something that I'm not familiar with? I'm a little out of it. I feel like I was saying something and I lost my thought process, but that's okay. I'll move on to the next thing. Do you use Expo or React Native Client? I have used Expo so far. Now, I haven't done it yet, but from what I've read, it's very easy to just eject Expo at any point if you want to work with the just bare React Native. So, and working with Expo makes the development, the setup a lot easier, the development a lot easier. So it's really nice. And it has all these built-in API features you can use. So that's what I've used so far. In my last project I did, I almost ejected it so many times because there are so many juicy React Native packages that you can use to help with different features. But in each case, I found my way around it, so I never actually had to eject it. But I know someday that I'll have to do it. Let's see, how much HTML, CSS do you need to know to be a developer? That is a good question. I kind of breezed through that section. I was really eager to get to JavaScript. That's what I wanted to do is JavaScript. HTML, CSS was a little boring to me because there was no logic involved. There's no like problem-solving logic involved, at least from my perspective. So I just want to get through it and get to JavaScript. Now, with a little more experience, I realize it really is the groundwork it really is the foundation to everything else. Um, so understanding it more, especially CSS, like I continually run into problems with CSS. Like developers roll their eyes at it sometimes, be like, oh, CSS. But it's because there's so much that you could learn in it. Um, I guess in my experience, you can continue to pick things up as you go along. I guess the main thing is just not to be lazy about it, which is hard to say to developers because that's like our greatest virtue is laziness, right? Always trying to find shortcuts. Why are there so many styling libraries? Because we don't want to have to style things from scratch. We want to write code. We don't have to worry about styling stuff, you know. Um, but it always comes back to bite you in the end if you don't know how to manipulate things with CSS. So don't spend too much time on it. Like, don't worry about becoming an expert, but at least know about HTML forms, for example, HTML forms and how they work, uh, and understand CSS, Flexbox, and the different properties involved in. I mean, I learned CSS Grid, but you really will only use that. I mean, at least I've only used it for really big screen, like huge. Anyway, Flexbox is good enough for most things. And it also lets you design mobile first. Let's see. Okay, thanks for coming, Hernan. Where do I know you from? Do I know you from LinkedIn or Twitter? I need to keep my eye out for you on both of those. Let's see, what else am I missing? Oh, LinkedIn. Hi, Marlon. Oh, get started with an algorithms blog. Great. Yeah, algorithms. I wish you're my go-to. If I was your neighbor, I'd be your go-to person. Well, that would be nice. Like this would be the best if we were like sitting out around a fire pit and having our drinks and laughing, and that would be the best situation. Wouldn't that be nice? Ah. But at the same time, okay, LinkedIn, great. I'll see you there. But at the same time, like it's amazing that LinkedIn and Twitter has been able to bring people together from all over the world. It's amazing. Like, how likely would it be that we'd actually live in the same neighborhood and be hanging around talking about coding? Like, not very likely. So yeah, so we get to have conversations. In other words, let's put it that way. Like, for example, my first freelance client was from the UK. And then like a couple weeks later, another person from the UK reached out to me and I got my job in California, and it's just, people are everywhere. So it's a global community. It's kind of neat. Let's see, what other questions do you guys have? This is kind of fun. We've got about 10 minutes left. My husband was like, "Are you really going to do this for a whole hour? Like, what are you going to talk about?" I don't know. We'll see. I'll just talk gibberish if I need to. Talk about my freelance gig. Okay, what do you want to know? Just how I got it, or what it was like doing it, or problems I ran into, or what? Very, very adult, very adult, very good. How did I get it? Learning publicly. I was on LinkedIn, and this is when I basically decided to look for jobs. Decided not to look for jobs. Decided to just quit looking for jobs because of the pandemic and just discouragement and all this stuff. I'm like, okay, I'm going to just put this aside and just learn something new, because I'm tired of the same old thing. I want to learn something new now. And it was between TypeScript and React Native. TypeScript came up in a lot of job searches because companies are using it more and more to make JavaScript more strongly typed, basically. But there's also a lot of job listings for React Native because people want mobile apps for their products. So it's between those two, and TypeScript sounded boring and React Native sounded like a lot of fun. that's how I made that decision. um, so I signed up for an Udemy course for React Native. I did kind of some free tutorials, but they didn't go deep enough, and I wanted to go deep. So I did the Maximilian Schwartzmiller, I can never say his last name, course on React Native. And I posted about it on LinkedIn that I'm going through this course. So I get a message from someone in England saying, asking if I know anything about React Native or something about learning React Native. So I said, oh, there's this great course if you want to look into it. I didn't know he was looking for me to do it. I thought he wanted to learn it himself. So he said, oh, great, I'll look into it. And then about a week later, he said, do you want to do a React Native app for me? So that's how that started. It's just this one guy in England who has this business idea. I think he was a self-taught engineer as well. He works on the back end. So he was actually making the API for this, and he just wanted me to do the front end. So at the same time, so on the one hand, it was my first freelance experience, but on the other hand, it was also my first collaborative project. Like I got to collaborate with someone. Great. So that was 2 strikes in my favor. What was it like to set your goals and solve it? Like, what was it like meeting my goals? Well, my goals are very adaptable. Like I have some long-term goals. I have some general long-term goals, but how I get there, like my shorter term goals are very adaptable. So, okay, my general goal is a better life for me and my family, right? I have this vision of what life could be like for us, and I always have that in my mind. I'm like, we're going to get there. Like my short-term goals was I was going to start applying for jobs at the beginning of January. I started that and it wasn't working out, so I took a break to learn some more. And then my goal was to start applying again. And then a global pandemic hit and hiring freezes. So I'm like, okay, what next? So when stuff like that comes up, like global pandemics, you got to be flexible. And even though you have that long-term goal in mind, you have to work with what you've got, basically. Interview horror stories. My worst interview was my first one. And because it was my first one, I didn't realize how horrible it was until later on. um, so, great. I'm glad I answered your question. Yes. Right. So my first interview, my first in-person interview, I showed up at the building and it was locked. I'm like, okay. So I waited around. I tried calling the office and nobody answered like twice. So I was just standing around. The security guard finally came to the door and asked me, I'm like, I'm supposed to have an interview at this company. I'm like, okay, I'll let you in. And I got up and I found the office and nobody was there. So I just sat down hoping they hadn't forgotten about me. Finally, this guy comes out and he's like, oh yeah, are you Martha? Okay, great. And he starts getting his cup of coffee and didn't even like shake my hand or anything. I'm like, okay. And then we finally go back to a room, just me and him. And we sit down and he gives me kind of an API that I can work with and wants me to build a React app he gives me like wireframes and an API, and he wants me to create a React app from scratch to get the data from this API and create something that looks like this wireframe. And it actually feels pretty good because I'm sitting there, I'm like, I know how to do this, So I sit there with my laptop, create React app, and it builds, and I start doing I do some planning out on a piece of paper, like, okay, so this is what the structure is going to look like and everything. And it goes really well. Like, I think it goes really well. And he even says at the end, like, wow, yeah, a lot of what you did was spot on. Like, that's how we do it and everything. And then at the end of the interview, he says, yeah, it looks like you don't have the experience level we need. So sorry about that. I said, oh, okay. And then I leave. When I get home, I tell my husband about it. He's like, that is really weird. They usually don't tell you right at the end of the interview that they're not gonna consider you. Usually they like wait a day or so. I said, oh, okay, that's really weird. And then as I talked to other developers about the experience, like he thought I was too inexperienced because I hadn't worked with OAuth, but other developers were like, well, you could pick that up super quick. Too inexperienced because I used fetch instead of Axios. That was another thing that everyone was like, what? But at the interview, I didn't realize anything was wrong. But later on, as I was getting these reactions from other people, I thought maybe they had already decided that they weren't going to hire me even before the interview, and they were just going through the motions or something, Anyway, I don't know what was going on there, but that's one reason why being connected with people on LinkedIn and Twitter and getting feedback from a lot of people instead of just one person can be very helpful. Because if I had just taken his word for it that I wasn't good enough, then that would have been it. But because I got feedback from a lot of different people, I realized, oh, maybe that wasn't it at all. Yeah, Axios, which I didn't really like. I had never used Axios because I had only used Fetch. And as a new developer, I'm using all these new tools like hooks and different things. And it's just normal for me. Whereas people who've been in the industry for a while realize that these are like the cutting edge, newest things, Let's see, how long did it take you to adopt the vernacular of a developer? Yes. It's a spoken language, and communication is so important. And I realized early on, like even when I would talk to Nat about it, my husband, he would be talking to me about all these things and I would have no idea what he was saying to me. Like I could build things and do things on the computer, but I could not speak the lingo. And I felt so dumb. Talking to other developers. So going to meetups really helped. Actually hearing it spoke. But you know what really helped was when I switched from just the articles and the curriculums online to doing online tutorials, like YouTube tutorials, because then I was actually hearing them use the language and speak the lingo and narrate through what they were doing. And I'd never actually heard anyone talking about it before because I was only doing just the online courses, online like curriculums and articles and things. So it made a huge difference when I switched to the coding tutorials to actually hear people talk about things and use the language. I think that was the turning point for me. Straightforwardness. Yeah, I don't like being led on. Straightforward is, straightforward's always better. Like there was this one guy who got some flack on LinkedIn because he looked at my code and said, frankly, he didn't like it. It was too messy and there was too many nested, I was using promises in the then catch syntax instead of async await, right? And he actually took part of my code and he refactored it with async await, and he showed this to me. And I loved that. Like maybe it was a little undiplomatic to start out with, I don't like your code. He could have put it in a different way. But the fact that he took my code and refactored it and gave me super constructive criticism helped so much. And it helps a lot more than just people saying, your code is awesome and you're awesome, which I appreciate too. I love that too, of course. But what he did actually helped me learn and grow. So, yes, I appreciate straightforwardness and feedback in that sense. Um, yeah, they might have already found someone. Yep. I don't know. I don't know. But in a certain but that's a good point. When you're going to interviews, just you don't you don't know why they rejected you. When you get a rejection, you have no idea why. Um, and and it's so easy to take it personally or to take it as a huge slam, um, and get discouraged. But usually there's business reasons. Like this happened to me several times that I had a lead and then the company decided to, instead of hiring a few junior developers, they decided to pool the resources and just hire one senior developer, so that's another business reason. And most reasons that they reject you really have nothing to do with you at all. There's just some kind of something going on in the business and they're just making business decisions. And you're collateral damage, or, it sounds bad, but that's the business world, right? I mean, you gotta find a win-win situation where you're making money and they're making money, right? That's the name of the game. Um, anyway, I guess it's been an hour now, and this has actually been kind of fun. Have you guys had fun? This is kind of fun. Um, I might do this again sometime, maybe. Sometimes I do Zoom chats with people. Tomorrow morning, I'm doing a Zoom chat with someone who reached out to me, and that's always very fun to talk to someone. Um, I'm glad you guys came. I'm glad you had questions, and happy Friday. Going into another week. Cheers. End the stream. Yes, end it.